welcome our viewer. This is Keep Evolving, episode 15, and we are so grateful that God has enabled us to continue this journey. Today we have a very, very interesting session, and I have a special guest called Faith. Faith is the founder of Meheta Bell Counseling Services, and she'll be telling you very shortly what she's doing at Meheta Bell as a counselor. Karibu sana Faith.
Thank you, Jackie. My name is Faith Gushu, a counseling psychologist, formerly from the banking industry, but now in my element. Thank you.
Asante sana, Faith. I'm so glad that you're here with us, and I have been so interested in your program, The Losses Without Funerals. I found that name really, intriguing, and it created a lot of curiosity. And I'm so glad that today we can talk about the losses without funerals, having been even a beneficiary of some of the sessions in your program. So karibu sana. So let's get going. And the first thing I want to ask you, Faith, is how did you come up with losses without funerals? What is it all about?
Losses without funerals are losses that we have incurred that we have not buried. And most of them are not recognized, or no one knows that we're going through them. And after taking people through losses and grief, I realized there were losses that were being triggered that people knew not about. They didn't know about them. And the session helped me to go through, to take people through them. And from there has been a lot of healing. Yeah.
One of the things that I really appreciated about the losses without funerals is that the awareness it brings out. I mean, many times when we think about loss, we think about the loss and grief related to funerals, related to maybe loss of relationships. But we never dive deeper to see that any loss has so much other losses intertwined. So I really appreciate that you're with us today. And I think by the end of today, some of us will be looking back at our lives and seeing, are there losses that actually are still very unprocessed? And also discovering that this was actually a loss, but I've never thought of it that way. Okay. So karibu sana.
Asante.
Now, losses without funerals. Faith, what are some of these losses that we bury deep or we never get to know until maybe we have somebody like a counselor like you to take us through? What would that look like?
The first loss is loss of self. Where you lose ourselves in the midst of many other things.
Okay.
And when you lose you lose yourself, you lose ourselves. You can lose yourself in a marriage. You can lose yourself in the conditions of worth, because we are 40% genetic and 60% environmental. So most of the time, without knowledge, we lose ourselves in the 40% genetic. So you grow up not as self, but as your parents wanted you to become. That is one.
That is a genetic now.
Yeah, that is a genetic. The environmental, you can lose yourself at the place of work. Okay. And even in marriages, which we will talk about as a second loss. So in the losing of self, you can also lose self in the midst of having given birth or having gotten married, having gotten a job. So you lose who you are and you start transforming as in roles and not in purpose.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow. You lose yourself and it's because of the environment, your career, your marriage.
Yes.
Okay. And so are there other losses apart from now the losing of self? And maybe I would want us to dive deeper that when you lose, for example, when you lose yourself in a career or in the job, what would that look like?
What would look like is you lose yourself because you're very busy concentrating on growing up the corporate ladder. So you lose yourself in terms of you don't know who you are, but you're very busy in knowing who you are in career-wise. But when you're told who are you away from work, away from marriage, away from everyone else, you don't know how to define who you are. So that is a loss in self. You're very busy and your career ladder is up there, but when you're asked who you are, you wouldn't be able to mention.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the reasons why sometimes we find we're asked, who are you? Who is Jackie? And the first thing is you're talking about your family,
Yes.
your job. You're not really able to qualify and quantify who exactly
You are.
is Jackie.
Yes.
Okay. Are there other types of losses that?
Yes. You lose yourself when you lose You lose yourself in a marriage.
Okay.
How is that? I would want to concentrate on women because rarely do men lose themselves in marriage. But for women, we lose ourselves at the altar or we lose ourselves at the labor ward, where you come out being mama so-and-so. It is until after you are about some years to 40, over 35, you start realizing, by the way, who am I? Reason? Because everyone is doing things and you're not able to do them because you are very busy concentrating on the children. When the children grow, then you're left empty. And your husband is very busy, either doing business or other things because they never, rarely do they lose themselves. So here you are in a cocoon, empty, and asking yourself, by the way, away from being a wife, away from being a parent, who am I? That is one. We also lose ourselves in marriages in regards to, you can lose a marriage. After you've lost a marriage, you also lose yourself in the lost marriage. How? That happens when, for example, you've lost a marriage due to maybe you felt your significant other felt you are not good enough. So when you lose that marriage, you go looking for validation outside. So you hurt yourself twice and you lose yourself twice. You've lost a marriage and you lose yourself in the promiscuous way of doing things. That is one. That is the second one.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you're losing your marriage, but at the same time, you may be thinking you're building yourself, but in reality, you're still losing yourself again.
Let me explain.
Yeah.
This is just a scenario where you feel you are jailed. You are in jail. You get freedom and you get outside. Then you jail yourself in the freedom by engaging in things you ought not to have engaged on because you're looking for affirmation, you're looking for validation. Hence, by the end of the day, you have triggered, you have two losses.
Okay.
And now the second loss triggers the first loss, if it's not well processed.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. So you've talked about the loss of yourself in a marriage for having lost a marriage.
Yes.
And you've also talked about this loss where you lose yourself.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I'm thinking about other losses that we go through and we never really realize that they have such a big impact on us. And yet they actually do. Like I was thinking in terms of when people get redundancy, you know, you find that they go through, yes, a training maybe to prepare them. It is said that they're being prepared. But when you think about that, you're losing your career or your job, there's a bigger picture to that loss. There's the job itself, there is your status,
Yes.
you're losing networks.
Yes.
And so I'm looking at some of the effects that we never really get to process. And maybe you
Yes.
can say something about that.
And let me talk about the great team that lost job during this COVID season.
Okay.
One, in 2020, everyone had resolutions, yeah? And most of us were like, these are the things we would want to achieve. So here, there's no work. And remember, you have liabilities and you have investment and you have also goals.
Okay.
So when you lose a job, not only do you lose a job, you lose a job and all that entails to the job. What do I mean? Liabilities, future goals, the current goals, and even the network. And now the status. You also lose the status. The other thing, still having lost a job, you lose the status quo in terms of maybe you are living in this certain place, but then now because you don't have a job, you may not be able to continue living in that estate or in that state. So meaning you have to lose the status quo and go to another place in order for you to be able to cope. But sometimes it takes so long. Then I want to talk about retirement. When you retire, remember you've been very busy working in the organization. It could be either a corporate institution or an institution, meaning from morning to evening, you've been busy and these are the people you've gotten used to. So what happens when you retire, you're going back to people you never gave time to.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll talk about, because this is a church forum, I'll talk of a church forum where you are working and your family is outside Nairobi or your family is in Shags. Remember, this family, or for example, the wife or even the husband has found something to do in their retirement home. You have not been in a retirement place. So you go back home and we give you a package. But we are giving you a package. Yes, you've retired. But what are you losing? You're losing a network that you've been able to have for the maybe the longest period.
Yeah.
Now, going back, Shags, unless you purpose, and remember, some of us are not very, we are not very talkative. So you go back home and you don't have a network. You don't have friends. But remember, the person you're finding in Shags has already formed some networks.
Yes.
So when you go back there are two things that happen. Some people conform, like, trying to fit in. Others, they force themselves to fit in. How does that happen? And I'll give an example of where this is my project as a woman. I've been running this project and you've been assisting me and coming back home maybe after a week. And you want now to take the project because there's nothing else for you to do.
Yeah.
And the reason now for us as counselors is to ensure that people move from the roles to purpose. So that even if you retire, you are able to cope after retirement. That is the other loss. Loss of job for the young ones and for the retired, the retirees.
All right.
Yes.
Wow. So we are realizing that actually, it looks like when you have a loss, it has a multiple aspect of it.
Yes.
But really, do we process the multiple bits?
Yes.
We just look at the face value of a loss.
Yes.
All right. Wow. We are glad that you have continued to watch, and we'll take a short break, then we'll be right back. Thank you. Welcome back, our viewer. Today we are talking about losses without funerals. Have you ever thought about the kind of losses we go through, and sometimes actually the kind of losses that we never even get to know that we are undergoing a loss? And that's some of the things that we are talking about today. We are finding out that there could be a loss and many other losses beneath a major loss. So Karibu Sana, welcome back, Faith.
Thank you.
Before we left, we were talking about aspects of redundancy and retirement.
Okay.
Now, there are many times when I see, like in the current situation, the COVID situation, people have been asked to step back, like you can go back to the office, and unexpectedly, people have lost jobs. So that is also a loss.
Yes.
And other times, people have been asked to retire early by some companies, maybe because they are going through a merger or reconstruction. And I see times when people are told, let's call somebody, an expertise in this field of training, to prepare those that will be leaving us maybe in the next 2-3 months. And they do what they would call counseling, training, to help them cope. What would be a view from, as a counselor, about now those short programs to prepare them to leave the organization? And usually they say that they will undertake the programs both for those who are remaining, because there's an effect of that loss on the ones who are remaining and the ones who are leaving. Sometimes I think they are too short or they are too brief, but I don't know what you say about that from a counseling perspective.
First, we need to appreciate that there's that first aid.
Okay. All right.
Because we would call it first aid.
Yeah.
However, it is important, it is paramount for people to go through programs. Because it's not only are you losing a job, you are losing other things. And someone may not be able to bring out those losses in a one-day program, in a one-day seminar. And when you mix now the people who are remaining and the guys who are going out, they may not be able to come out clearly on the losses that they are incurring or the losses that they have incurred. In regards to counseling, it is important after now the program for people to be seen on one-on-one, because sometimes the current loss triggers other losses that most of us do not process or had not processed. So this person has lost a job, but the job has triggered other losses. In order for him to cope outside there, I think it's important for the institution to know or to ensure that they go through programs, both now longer programs and one-on-one counseling sessions, or the group counseling sessions for those ones who've lost a job.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would there be losses that are connected? Because I'm looking at losses now, and I'm thinking in terms of holistic kind of losses.
Yes.
It's like a career, there's the financial.
Yes.
There could be, what other kind of losses? There's the social, because you talked about the networks.
Yes.
There's the psychological, because you're affected even mentally.
Yes.
In a season of really a lot of mental issues because of these losses. So, and would we also say that you can have a spiritual kind of a loss?
Yes, you can. How do you do that? Mostly we get spiritual loss when, remember, we know we have been conditioned, and it is true that God answers prayers.
Yeah.
So you ask yourself, if God was answering prayers, why have I lost a job? Why has my significant other died? Why have I lost this and this? So sometimes you sit back and try asking yourself, was really God there? If he was there, so somehow you get steps back in your spiritual life, because you cannot be able to process how you lost a job, yet you are very spiritual, or you are seeking the Lord.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think even when we'll be dealing with the effects now, we'll be able to see also how sometimes you can lose it all.
Yes.
Holistically.
Yes.
Okay. And come to think of it, let's say something about, what about people who lose like a child before the child is born?
Okay.
You know, the miscarriage, the stillbirth. What would you say about that kind of a loss?
This is one loss that is not recognized, because in fact when for stillbirth, at least the pregnancy is open.
Okay.
It's out there, and guys you're able to tell someone is pregnant. But now for miscarriages, some women miscarriage at 1 month, at 2 weeks, at the first trimester. So you're not able, someone has not been able to tell if you are pregnant or not. So when you lose that pregnancy, and apart from your significant others, other people even at the workplace, not able to tell that Faith lost a child. So you're going through the losses alone. And you're wondering, the mood changes, because remember, you're going through these losses and the emotions are different. So you cannot understand why the boss, for instance, is not understanding, but the boss is not aware that you have lost a child.
Yeah.
So the other thing about miscarriages, when you lose, not only have you lost a baby, you've lost hope of becoming a mother. You've lost hope, even fathers, you've lost hope of becoming a father. When a miscarriage happens, you've lost hope. And not only have you lost, remember, there are people, because we are relationship oriented. Not only now as a nuclear family, there are other people who are expectant to be named, for the lineage to continue. So there's a loss. Not only do you lose a child in a miscarriage, there's a lot of, you lose hope. You lose, you feel like you're losing a lineage. You feel like you're not good enough. More so because there are people who've lost babies who've miscarriage more than even about 5 times in about 3 years. Then there's something I would want to mention on miscarriages. When you see now, for instance, if I have a child who is 10 years and there's a gap for 7 years, I've not been able to get another child, please be kind enough to me. Because there's a story between the now you're seeing and the 10-year-old. I could have struggled. So if you ask me, it's time to give birth to a child, you don't know my struggle. So sometimes in a church forum and even outside, it is important to be kind to our fellow women and even men who've gone through miscarriages.
Okay.
Yes.
So you're talking about really being sensitive.
Yes.
Sometimes there's a lot of assumptions.
Yes.
When we don't see people with babies,
Yes.
even after marriage,
Yes.
they could actually have even gone through a loss.
Yes.
We would not be able to know.
Yes.
It's only them and the significant other. And I know in another session we'll be talking about the grieving cycle.
Yes.
Because it will mean that even for them, even though we have not seen, like a baby, they still have to go through the grieving cycle. Wow, thank you, Faith.
Karibu.
So now let's look at some of the effects of these losses. Before I go to some of the effects, I want to ask you is that, I know you had mentioned it earlier, but how can I get to know that possibly there could be losses I'm going through and they have not been processed?
When someone shares a story that is relating to your loss, then you start tearing. Or you feel the emotions. And I'll give an example of where I've had these losses without funerals in churches and in other forums. Then you find people very agitated because they thought they forgave and moved on. But this the session now awakens the losses that you've incurred in life. So anytime something is mentioned and it triggers a pain, it reminds you of that, and the emotions are not positive, then you've not processed.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow. All right. So what are some of the effects now of these unknown or unprocessed losses?
One I would call anger. You have anger pangs and you don't know where they're coming from. There's something I call bleeding on the people who didn't hurt you.
Okay.
How do you bleed on people who didn't hurt you? If, for example, you lost a relationship and you're into another relationship, and the first relationship, you came out of that relationship, for example, with a baby. So in the second relationship, you're very bitter with the first child because he or she is a reminder of the loss that you incurred in the first relationship that you didn't process. Yeah.
Wow.
Just an example.
So that's one of the effects.
Yeah, that's one of the effects where you bleed on people who didn't hurt you. Sometimes you have mood swings. You don't know where they are coming from. Sometimes you are not able to help someone who's gone through a loss because it's a reminder of your loss that you've not processed.
Okay.
Yes.
So you almost like you get, what do you call it? I don't know what you call it in the counseling, what we call it in the counseling terms. Whereby, yes, somebody is going through a pain, they share it with you, and then you get to sympathize or invest in it because you also haven't processed or you don't even
Transference.
know the transference.
Yes.
And then there's this bit where I think there are times when we keep saying something is disturbing me, but I can't tell what it is. Maybe that could also be that the fact that somebody has mentioned something that was a loss or it's traumatizing to you, and then you have not processed it. Okay. What other effects would be there if I live with losses? I keep moving on with losses that I never think about. I just assume, put them at the back, or sometimes never get to know.
One, it blurs you from being your authentic self.
Okay.
Yeah, it blurs you. In a nutshell, it blurs you from being your authentic self. Because when you're not able to edge out, because you're being held back by the losses. I don't know whether you've ever seen the Rwandese photo of the genocide, where you see skulls all over.
Yeah.
So most of us walk dead. We are already dead. So meaning we cannot be able to do anything or to live a life that is lively or to be able to get to our purpose. Reason, we are already dead. And whatever has made us die, it's a loss or losses that we've incurred. Somehow, we don't know they are losses.
Yeah.
Secondly, we don't know how to process them. Thirdly, we don't think, because most people have not embraced counseling. Because you think coming for counseling is a sign of weakness, which is not. So sometimes it is important. If you feel you're getting disturbed, it is important to get help. Yeah.
I'm picking that you will not perform optimally.
Yes.
In a nutshell, when you're going through those losses or when you have not processed your losses. So it's very important to really process your losses.
Yes.
How would you see the relationship between the issue of losses and trauma? Because sometimes I think some of these losses are really traumatizing. And I do acknowledge that, of course, these are topics that are really huge. But maybe you can say something about trauma and losses.
Now, for trauma, one, when you assume you had trauma in childhood that wasn't processed, or you didn't get help in order to come out of it. So what happens in life going forward, you see life through that trauma. And it could be, for example, where you were attacked by a man or a woman in a black jacket. So you live thinking that at night, if I see a man in a black jacket, then my inner being is alert that this calls for danger, which is essentially not the case. Yeah. So the trauma, if you experience a trauma in childhood and you don't process it, so when you experience another loss, it triggers the trauma that you didn't process in childhood. The other thing about trauma, when you go through a trauma and you don't deal with it, when you go another trauma, it triggers. In fact, it re-traumatizes the earlier trauma. I don't know whether I'm communicating.
I think I've lost a bit there. Maybe we can at least simplify it a little bit. So how does that happen? That you've gone through a trauma. Let's say when the losses come with a trauma.
Yes.
And then you don't process.
Yes.
The next time you face another trauma.
The next time you face another, it is too huge for you to process. The emotions are way out there.
Yeah.
And I think you've ever seen people, for example, you can lose a baby.
Yeah.
And I'll give myself disclosure. I lost my mom in 2005. And before I lost her, I lost a baby in February, who I would have named my mom. So when she died, her loss triggered the loss of my baby because I had not processed it. You see, the way we are told be collected. I mean, and most firstborns become the administrators. So you do not process a loss. Yeah.
Okay, now I get you. So I guess even the way sometimes some people resort in things like drugs and becoming behavior, it could also be because of these unprocessed losses connected with, of course, the trauma. All right. Okay, how do I cope? Or how can I get help? Which one do I ask? How do I cope? Let's say I'm going through a loss. And I know we will be looking at the grieving cycle in the next session. But at this point, let's say I'm going through a loss. What are some of the coping mechanisms?
First and foremost is to appreciate, or rather be cognizant that you have lost. Being cognizant that you have lost. It is true I've lost a job. It is true I've lost my marriage. It is true I've lost a baby. It is true there's a loss in my life. So the first thing you need to do is name the feeling. What feelings do you feel after the loss? And what are the thoughts? Because the thoughts can go wayward. You know, thinking, how do I live tomorrow? What do I do? I mean, how do I progress? So with for you to cope, the first thing, you don't cope in losses.
Okay. You don't cope in
You
losses.
don't cope in losses, because when you say coping, it means you're not processing. You're using avoidance. And like you have said, people getting into drugs or doing other habits, self-defeating habits, it's a sign of avoidance.
Okay.
And maybe the loss is too humongous, you don't know how to go through it. So, and the other thing, because we don't cope, is seek for help.
Seek for help.
Yeah, seek help. Yeah.
So the best thing is seek for help.
Yes.
Don't cope when it comes to losses.
Yes.
It's really finding ways to process.
Because when you cope, it means you are hiding, you're putting a facade, like I'm okay and collected, yet I'm hurting inside. And that's why I've said, if you don't, the coping mechanism means you are walking dead. You know, you're walking dead. And for us to bring out the life outside of us, it means we have to process the losses we've gone through. Yeah.
Wow, lovely. And what about for those now who do not actually know that actually they could be going through a loss? Because there are people, even for some of us, there could be a loss that we are not even aware. What would you tell us? How would you advise us?
Sometimes it's good to embrace the seminars that happen, because sometimes they give you an awakening call. By the way, whatever they have, she's mentioned, that would be a loss on me. And it is always important to talk to a friend. You need a go-to person. This is how I'm feeling. Somehow that person might pick, you're not okay. You know, you're not okay. So from there, maybe she will or he will advise you to seek help. Yeah. It is always important to have a go-to person, because that go person, I can tell Jackie, you are not okay today. Then I'll be asking, what is happening in your life? You know, then I'll take you through, as much as I'm not a counselor, but it is important to have peer counseling, even in institutions, where we are able to help our people to be able to understand I'm not okay and I need to seek for help. Yes.
Wow, thank you, Faith. I think you're also bringing the aspect that it's really important for us to have a confidant, even as we share our lives with others, that there's always that person who you can be able to talk to, and they can be able to genuinely tell that I'm not feeling okay, or they can even give us feedback that I think you're not okay, you need help. All right.
There's something I need to add.
Okay.
Our male species, kindly speak out, because you pocket issues. The many pockets you have in your coats and trousers, that is how much you pocket your issues. And that's why they are dying. They are getting depressed. They get into self-defeating habits. So it is important to get to that go-to person. And more so in this season.
Okay.
Yes.
The COVID season. Yeah, there's a lot of mental health issues happening at this time. Thank you, Faith. I think there's so much about losses, and it's when I think about losses without funerals, it was really a time to reflect for me, to think about what are some of these losses that we go through that we never talk about, or people cannot easily pick that this is a loss, like that, other than the ones that we normally refer to as losses. And I'm grateful that you've been with us today. I remember the last time we were talking about even how we lose, even the loss of your values.
Yes.
And maybe that is something you can talk about. There are times that if you're somebody who has principles and values, and you do something and you find that this is a value that I seem to be losing, that it can really affect you. And I mean, it happens even in organizations where we have people not coping, employees and staff, because people have different values, value system. Maybe like, let's take an example of here. You're a Christian, and then you have maybe a boss who is not a Christian. And I want you to talk about that, the conflict of values or the loss of values. I know at the beginning you said you can lose yourself in the job, and possibly this is one of the ways. So something about values, the loss of values.
How do you lose yourself at your place of work? One, you could be having these values. These are my values.
Yeah.
And you could be having a boss who thinks differently. It is important from the onset to act from a point of knowledge. One, communicating. I mean, this is what I believe in. Now, the problem or the challenge comes when you stoop low to meeting someone at the low, down there, and they still hurt you. So it is important to ensure that you don't lose yourself at the place of work. Yeah, in terms of this is what I believe in, and it needs to be communicated, of course, with a lot of respect.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's very important for our young professionals,
Yes.
even as they get engaged in their jobs. And thank you, Faith.
Karibu.
I believe we've had a session that we are also learning. We are in the process of getting to know what are some of the losses that remain unprocessed, and getting to know more of the losses. Viewer, we are so glad that you've been watching. Faith, like she mentioned, she's the founder of Meheta Bell Counseling Services. And if you want to dive deeper and get to know some of your losses and process some of your losses, please join us for a Zoom that will be happening on the 7th of April. That is a Saturday, and you can get in touch with her. At the same time, she runs a program where she does counseling in groups. Again, the whole aspect of processing our losses. And she has that special program, Losses Without
Funerals.
Mainly targeting the losses that we incur or we go through. And many times, sometimes we are never able to know which losses they are. Yet they continue to define who we are becoming and to affect our day-to-day lives. It's been a pleasure, Faith.
Thank you,
We look forward
Jackie.
to having you here again.
Thank you.
As we go through the grieving cycle, possibly in the next session.
Okay.
Karibu sana.
Asante.
Viewer, we are grateful. We want to say special thanks to ACK St. Peter's Church Kahawa Sukari for giving us this opportunity and this platform. Kindly remember to like and subscribe our YouTube page. Keep watching and stay blessed. Thank you.
Thank you.